Good day everyone. My name is Fairuz Almaliga. For today's topic, we'll be talking about where did the first Catholic Mass take place here in the Philippines. So, this particular topic that we are about to discuss is one of those controversial and conflicting issues happens in our historical events. It is said to be that the site of the first Catholic Mass was the popularity of knowing where the first happened in history has been an easy way to trivialize history. But this case study will not focus on the significance of the site of the first Catholic Mass in the Philippines, but rather use it as a historiographical exercise in the utilization of evidence and interpretation in reading historical events. So it means that is our main purpose in the lesson. We will not be focusing on each significance, but rather we are using this particular document enable to us to exercise historiographical for the utilization evidence for our interpretation in reading historical events. Butuan has long believed as the site of the first mass. Because, according to the previous historian, in difference to Pigafetta's account, said that Magellan went to Butuan, and there have held the first mass on the basis of the explorers' meeting with the island scheme. In fact, this has been a case for 3 centuries, culminating in the erection of a monument in 1872 near Agusan. The monument is a testimonial to the tradition and remains barbarous until the end of 19th century. Mainly, Magellan expedition landed to Butuan and celebrate the first mass ever over in the Philippines. Toward the end of 19th century and the start of 20th century, together with the increasing scholarship on the history of the Philippines, a more nuanced reading of available evidence was made, which brought to more light consideration in going against the accepted interpretation of the Mass in the Philippines, made both by Spanish and Filipino scholars. This came about when both foreign and local historical research scholars of the period shifted their view from traditionally. It must be noted that there are only two primary sources that historian refers to in identifying the site of the first mass. One is the Laguep by Francisco Albo, a pilot of one of Magellan's ship Trinidad. He was one of the 18 survivors who returned with Sebastian Elcano on the ship Victoria after they circumnavigated the world. The second one and more complete was the account by Antonio Pigafetta, or First Voyage Around the World. Pigafetta, like Albo, was a member of the Magellan expedition and an eyewitness of the event, particularly of the first mass. Here's the first primary sources, the Laguep by Francisco Albo. He began keeping his own diary, merely a logbook on the voyage out while they were sailing southwards. And here's what happened. On the 16th of March, 1521, as they sailed Ladrones, they saw a land toward the northwest. But owning too many shallow places, they did not approach it. Found later that its name was Yunagan. They went instead that same day to southwards to another island named Suluan. They anchored a ship on their arrival. They saw a canoes, but the canoes fled at the Spaniard approach. The said island was at 9 2/3 degrees north latitude. Leaving that island, they sailed westward to an inhabited island of Gada. The Bada was inhabited place and it is also free from shallows. And wala ring nakatira dito kaya they provided their own food and their own water. From that island, they sailed westward towards a large island named Ceylani. It was inhabited place and was known to have gold. Ceylani, or as Pegapettus calls it, Ceylon, was the island of Leyte. Sailing southwards along the coast of the large island of Ceylani, They turned southwest to a small island called Mazaba. Mazaba is also at a latitude of 9 and 2/3 degrees north. People of that island of Mazaba were very good. There the Spaniards planted across upon a mountain top, and from there they were shown 3 islands to the west and southwest, where they were told there was so much gold. From Mazaba, they sailed northwards again towards Ceylani. They followed the coast of Ceylani in a northwesterly direction, ascending up to 10 degrees of latitude, where they saw 3 small islands. From Francisco Alboslag, the first Catholic Mass take place on the island of Mazawa. Based from the geographical evidence that the island of Mazawa totally fits on the location of the island of Limasawa at the southern cape of Leyte, with the 9 degrees and 54 degrees north. Here, it also described at the event the planting across at mountain top, wherein the 3 islands can be seen from west and southwest. Moving forward, so here's the second primary sources, which is Pigafetta's testimony on the route of Magellan's expedition. This primary source is also used by the historian, enable to them to know where the exactly location of the first mass here in the Philippines. So moving forward, here's what happened in that era according to Pigafetta's account. Saturday, on the 16th of March, 1521, Magellan's expedition sighted a highland named Zamad, which was some 300 leagues westward of Ladrones, now the Marianas Island. Sunday, March 17th, the following day, after sighting Zamal Island, they landed on another island which was inhabited, and which lay to the right of the above-mentioned island of Zamal. To the right, here would mean on their starboard going south or southwest. There they set up 2 tents for the 6 member of the crew, and had a sow killed for them. The name of this island was Humuno, or also called Homonhon. This island was located at 10 degrees north latitude. On that same day, Sunday, March 17, Magellan named the entire archipelago the island of St. Lazarus. The reason being that is, it was Sunday in the Lenten season when the Gospel assigned for the Mass and liturgical office was the 11th chapter of St. John, which tells the raising of Lazarus from the dead. The other happenings will be discussed by my partner.
Thursday, March 28, in the morning, they anchored near an island where they had seen the night before a small boat, Boloto, came with 8 natives, to whom Magellan threw some trinkets as presents. The natives paddled away, but 2 hours later 2 larger boats, Balanghay, came, in one of which the native king sat under an awning of mats. At Magellan's invitation, some of the natives went up the Spanish ship, but the native king remained seated in his boat. An exchange of gifts was effected in the afternoon that day. The Spanish ships weigh anchor and come closer to shore, anchoring near the native king's village. This Thursday, March 28th, was Thursday in Holy Week. Second, Friday, March 29, next day, Holy Friday. Magellan sent his slave interpreter ashore in a small boat to ask the king if he could provide the expedition with food supplies, and to say that they had come as friends and not as enemies. In reply, the king himself came in a boat with 6 or or 8 men, and this time went up Magellan's ship, and the 2 men embraced. Another exchange of gifts was made. The native king and his companions returned ashore, bringing with them 2 members of Magellan's expedition as guests for the night. One of the 2 was Pigafetta. Third, Saturday, March 30, Pigafetta and his companion had spent the previous evening feasting and drinking with the native king and his son. Pigafetta deplored the fact that, although it was Good Friday, they had to eat meat. The following morning, Saturday, Pigafetta and his companion took leave of their host and returned to the ships. Fourth, Sunday, March 31, early in the morning of Sunday, the last of March and Easter Day, Magellan sent the priests ashore with some men to prepare for the Mass. Later in the morning, Magellan landed with some 50 men and Mass was celebrated, after which a cross was venerated. Magellan and the Spaniards returned to the ship for the noonday meal, but in the afternoon they returned ashore to plant the cross on the summit of the highest hill. In attendance both at the Mass and at the planting of the cross were the King of Mazua and the King of Butuan. Fifth, Sunday, March 31, on the same afternoon, while on the summit of the highest hill, Magellan asked the 2 kings which port he should go to in order to obtain more abundant supplies of food than were available in that island. They replied that there are 3 ports to choose from: Ceylon, Zubu, and Calagan. Of the 3, Zubu was the port with the most trade. Magellan then said that he wished to go to Subo and depart the following morning. He asked for someone to guide him thither. The kings replied that the pilots would be available anytime. But later that evening, the king of Mazua changed his mind and said that he would himself conduct Magellan to Zubu, but that he would first have to bring the harvest in. He asked Magellan to send him men to help with the harvest. Sixth, Monday, April 1, Magellan sent men ashore to help with the harvest, but no work was done that day because the 2 kings were sleeping and their drinking about the night before. 7. Tuesday, April 2 and Wednesday, April 3, work on the harvest during the next 2 days. 8. Thursday, April 4, they leave Mazua bound for Cebu. Using the primary source available, Jesuit priest Miguel Bernad in his work Butuan or Limasawa, the site of the first Mass in the Philippines.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Good morning, classmates, and especially to Imam. I am Aliyah S. Pakan, BA Psychology 1A, and I'm here to report the continuation of my partner's report, Feruds Maliga, which is Primary Source, Pigafetta's Testimony on the Route of Magellan's Expedition. Let's start. Number 8. Monday, March 25, in the afternoon, the expedition weighed anchor and left the island of Humonhon. In the ecclesiastical calendar, this day, March 25, was the feast day of the Incarnation, also called the Feast of the Annunciation, and therefore Our Lady's Day. On this day, as they were about to weigh anchor, an accident happened to Pigafetta. He fell into the water but was rescued. He attributes his narrow escape from death as grace obtained through the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary on her feast day. 9. The route taken by the expedition after leaving Humonhon was toward the southwest between 4 islands, namely Sinalo, Hunanghan, Ibuson, and Albarin. Very probably, Sinalo is a www.curIsanus, namely misspelling in the Italian manuscript for what Pigafetta in his map calls Celion and also Albo calls Ceylani, namely the island of Leyte, Hunanghan, a misspelling of Hinunangan. Seem to Pigafetta to be separate island, but is actually on the mainland of Leyte, Ceylon. On the other hand, Hibuson, Pigafetta's Ibuson, is an island east of Leyte's southern tip. Thus, it is easy to see what Pigafetta meant by sailing towards the west-southwest, past those islands. They left Humonhon sailing westward towards Leyte, then followed the Leyte coast southward, passing between the island of Ibuson on their port side and Hunangan Bay on their starboard, and then continued southward and then turning westward to Mazua. Number 10. Thursday, March 28 in the morning of the Holy Thursday, March 28, they anchored off an island where the previous night they had seen a light or a bonfire. That island lies in a latitude of 9 and 2/3 towards the Arctic Pole, example north, and in a longitude of 162 degrees from the line of demarcation. It is 25 leagues from the Aquada and is called Mazua. 11. They remained 7 days on Mazua Island. Number 12. Thursday, April 4, they left Mazua bound for Cebu. They were guided there by the king of Mazua, who sailed in his own boat. The route took them past 5 islands, namely Ceylon, Bohol, Kanighan, Baybay, and Gatighan. At Gatighan, they sailed westward to the third islands of Camotes group, namely Poro, Pasihan, and Ponson. Here the Spanish ships stopped to allow the king of Mazua to catch up with them. Since the Spanish ships were much faster than the native Balanghay thing, that excited the admiration of the king of Mazua. From of Camotes Island, they sailed southwards towards Zubu. Sunday, April, at noon they entered the harbor of Cebu. It had taken them 3 days to negotiate the journey from Mazua northwards to the Camotes Island, and then southwards to Cebu. It must be pointed out that both Albo and Pigafetta's testimonies coincide and corroborate each other. Pigafetta gave more details on what they did during their week-long stay at Mazua. As we remember, studying this case, we use 2 accounts as our primary sources. These are the account of Antonio Pigafetta and the account of Francisco Albo, which is the Albor Loin. But between the 2 accounts of Antonio Pigafetta was more detailed than the account of Francisco Albo. But first, I will tell the event or happenings during the 7 days in Mahasa according to Pigafetta. Primary source Pigafetta and 7 days in Mazua. Source Emma Blair and James Alexander Robertson, The Philippines. Islands, vols.
33 and 34 as seated in Miguel A. Bernal, Butuan, and Limasawa. The start of the first mass in the Philippines, a re-examination of evidence, 1981. Kinaadman, a Journal of Southern Philippines, Volume 3, 1 to 35.